6:47 a.m., airport floor, 8 months pregnant. My custom wheelchair, gone. My husband, walking away with his mistress. She's wearing my $15,000 bracelet, pushing my wheelchair. And me, I'm crawling. Hands on filthy tile, strangers stepping over me like I'm trash. My water just broke. He researched this. He planned how long I could crawl before my body gave out. He wanted me humiliated, broken, desperate. He wanted to take my baby the second she was born. He thought a woman in a wheelchair couldn't fight back. He was dead wrong. I'm Charlotte Hayes, and this is the story of how I stopped crawling and started destroying the man who left me on that floor. They say you never really know someone until they have nothing left to gain from you. I learned that truth on a cold airport floor at 6:47 in the morning, 8 months pregnant, with my hands pressed against tile sticky with spilled coffee and the remnants of 1,000 hurried journeys. My name is Charlotte Morgan Hayes. I am 32 years old. I use a wheelchair. And 50 feet ahead of me, through the crowded terminal, my husband was walking away. "Nathan," I called out, my voice hoarse and breaking. "Nathan, please." He did not turn around. The woman pushing my wheelchair, my husband's assistant Ashley, had already disappeared through the gate. I could see her red coat vanishing into the jetway, my custom wheelchair rolling smoothly in her grip. The chair that fit my body perfectly. The chair that cost $12,000. The chair that was not supposed to leave my side. And I was here sitting in cold reality, realizing that the last 3 years of my life had been a carefully constructed lie. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back 72 hours to when I still believed my husband loved me, to when I still thought our marriage could survive my disability, to when I was naive enough to think that modifying a house meant modifying a heart. It was our anniversary. 5 years married, though the last 3 had been so different from the first 2 that they felt like separate lifetimes. 72 hours earlier, the restaurant was one of those places where the lighting is deliberately dim and the prices are deliberately absent from the menu. Nathan had made reservations weeks ago at Callahan's, the kind of establishment where businessmen closed deals and marriages pretended to be happy. I wore a designer maternity dress, deep blue, the kind that cost more than most people's monthly rent. My wheelchair was positioned at a table modified for accessibility, something the restaurant manager had arranged personally after Nathan called ahead. My husband was good at those gestures, the ones that looked thoughtful from the outside. Nathan checked his phone, again. It was the 4th time since we sat down, and we had only been there 11 minutes. "Sorry," he said, not looking sorry at all. "Just work stuff." The waiter approached, a young man with practiced charm. "For the lady, we have a wonderful sparkling cider, if you'd prefer something celebratory." "She can't drink anyway," Nathan said before I could respond. "Pregnancy?" His tone was dismissive, the way someone might mention an inconvenient cold. The waiter's smile flickered but held. I noticed Ashley Sutton at the bar, 30 feet away, Nathan's executive assistant, 26 years old, blonde, efficient, always available when Nathan needed her, which seemed to be increasingly often. She lifted her glass in our direction, a small gesture, barely noticeable. Nathan saw it. His fingers twitched in acknowledgement, a miniature wave that someone might miss if they were not watching closely. I was watching closely now. I had been for months. "I have a surprise," Nathan said, finally putting down his phone. "I'm flying to Paris Friday, European investor meeting. Just 3 days. But Charlotte, I'd like you to come see me off at the airport, like we used to." Before, he did not say the word, but it hung between us like smoke. Before the accident, before the wheelchair, before I became someone he had to take care of instead of someone he chose to be with. "Nathan, I'm 8 months pregnant," I said carefully. "The airport is exhausting, even without being this far along." "I know it's hard." His voice softened, the tone he used when he wanted something. "But I miss those moments with you, just to the gate. It would mean a lot to me." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly that I ignored every instinct screaming that something was wrong. That is what abuse does. It makes you gaslight yourself. "Okay," I said. "Yes, I'd like that." His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and I caught a glimpse of the message. Just a single letter, A. And beneath it, "Everything ready for Friday?" "Who's A?" I am. I asked, though I already knew. Ashley, coordinating Paris logistics. He swiped the message away with practiced ease. You know how detail-oriented she is. I did know. I also knew that detail-oriented was not the same thing as devoted. But I smiled and nodded and let him change the subject to something safe, something that did not require me to acknowledge the growing chasm between us. We had been married for 5 years. I had been in a wheelchair for 3 of them. And for 3 years, Nathan had been playing the role of devoted husband while slowly, methodically, building a cage around me and calling it love. The next morning, I went through our house and saw it with new eyes. Every modification, every accessibility feature, every carefully designed element that was supposed to make my life easier. Widened doorways, roll-in shower, lowered kitchen counters, ramps instead of stairs, and Nathan's bedroom upstairs, separate from mine. You need ground floor accessibility, he had said when he moved his things up there a year and a half after my accident. This way you don't have to worry about stairs. What he meant was, this way I do not have to sleep next to you. I found a receipt in his study while looking for the Paris travel itinerary. Van Cleef and Arpels, $15,000. A diamond tennis bracelet, purchased 3 weeks ago. I had not received jewelry in over 2 years. When I confronted Nathan that afternoon, he barely looked up from his laptop. Client gift, the Hoffmans, standard business practice. $15,000 is standard? He finally met my eyes and I saw something cold there. Something that had not been there before the accident. Or maybe it had always been there and I had been too in love to notice. Charlotte, I manage a $400 million company. A $15,000 gift is a rounding error. Please don't be paranoid. It's not attractive. Not attractive. The words landed like a slap. He had been saying things like that for months now. Little cuts that made me feel like I was the problem. Like my concerns were symptoms of instability rather than legitimate responses to his behavior. I wheeled away without another word. That afternoon, I had a doctor's appointment. Dr. Rebecca Sullivan had been my OB/GYN for the entire pregnancy, and she knew me well enough to recognize when something was wrong. Your blood pressure is 148/92, she said, her forehead creasing with concern. That's the 3rd week in a row it's been elevated. Charlotte, what's going on? I hesitated. Then I said it out loud for the first time. I think my husband is having an affair. Dr. Sullivan set down her tablet and gave me her full attention. Tell me. The words came tumbling out. The distance, the late nights, the separate bedroom, the jewelry I never saw, the assistant who was always around, the way Nathan looked at me now like I was a problem to be managed rather than a person to be loved. Since the accident, we've barely been intimate, I said, my voice small. I know my body is different now. I know I need help with things. But I thought he still loved me. I thought he was just adjusting. Now I think he's been waiting for an excuse to leave. Dr. Sullivan took my hand. Charlotte, stress at this level is dangerous, for you and for the baby. Your blood pressure puts you at risk for preeclampsia, preterm labor. You need to address this. After the baby comes, I said, just 4 more weeks. Then I'll figure it out. She looked at me for a long moment, then made a note in my chart. I'm documenting this conversation, not because I doubt you, but because I believe you. And if something happens, there needs to be a record of what caused it. That evening, my best friend Diane came over with her 2 kids, Sophie and Jake. They ran through my accessible backyard while Diane helped me pack an overnight bag for the airport trip. I'm sorry, Diane said, but this makes 0 sense. Why are you going to the airport 8 months pregnant just to wave goodbye? He asked me to. Things have been tense. Maybe this is him trying. Diane stopped folding clothes and looked at me. Char, Nathan hasn't been Nathan since your accident. He's been different, controlling. He's been under stress. The company, taking care of me. Taking care of you? Diane's voice rose. You had a full-time job before the accident. Now you're home all the time. You stopped seeing friends. You gave up your career, Charlotte. You're the one doing all the accommodating. I went to Nathan's study to find the travel itinerary and accidentally knocked over a file folder. Papers scattered across the desk, including our prenuptial agreement. 36 pages of legal language I had barely read before signing. Diane grabbed it, her eyes scanning quickly. She had been through a divorce herself. She knew what to look for. Her face changed. Charlotte, this has a fitness evaluation clause. If you divorce him before the baby turns 1, he can demand the court evaluate your physical and mental capability to parent. That's just standard custody language, right? No. Diane flipped through pages, her finger landing on specific sections. This specifically mentions mobility limitations and documented need for assistance with daily living activities. Char, this prenup specifically targets your disability. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Nathan wouldn't. He modified the whole house for me. He takes care of everything. Or he built you a beautiful cage and called it love. The words hung in the air between us. Outside, her kids laughed, the sound jarring against the heavy silence in the study. I need to go to the airport, I finally said. I need to see how he acts. I need to know for sure. Then I'm coming with you. No, he'll think I don't trust him. Just be on standby, please, just in case. Diane reluctantly agreed, but I could see the worry in her eyes. She hugged me goodbye, and I felt like I was saying farewell to more than just an evening. I was saying goodbye to the last shred of my denial. The morning of the airport trip, I woke at 5 in the morning with a sense of dread I could not explain. Nathan was already up, loading luggage into our accessible van. The sky was still dark, stars fading into the gray promise of dawn. Ashley pulled up in her car just as I was transferring from my wheelchair into the van's passenger seat. She stepped out, wearing a red coat, her blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Perfect. Efficient. Everything I used to be before the accident made me feel like I was constantly struggling just to keep up. Morning, she called out brightly. I'll follow you guys to the airport. I looked at Nathan, confused. You're coming to the airport? She's flying with me, Nathan said, not meeting my eyes. Executive assistant. Paris meetings require her presence. There it was, the red flag I had been ignoring for months, now waving so obviously I could not pretend not to see it. But what could I say? Of course a CEO would bring his assistant to important meetings. It was reasonable, logical. That was how Nathan operated. Everything he did had a reasonable explanation. Individually, each action was justifiable. Together, they formed a pattern I was only beginning to understand. In the van, Nathan was on his phone the entire drive. Low conversations, words I could not quite make out. I noticed that he had not loaded my custom wheelchair into the back. Instead, there was a standard airport loaner, the kind they keep at terminals for people who need temporary assistance. Nathan, where's my wheelchair? I asked. That's not mine. Your chair is being deep cleaned, he said smoothly. Remember? You scheduled it for this week. I did? Yes, Tuesday. You made the appointment. He glanced at me, his expression concerned. Charlotte, the pregnancy brain is really affecting you, honey. You're forgetting things. I tried to remember making that appointment. Had I? The past few weeks were a blur of doctor visits and exhaustion. Maybe I had scheduled it and forgotten. Or maybe Nathan was making me doubt my own memory. Gaslighting was insidious that way. It worked best when you could not tell if you were being manipulated or if you really were losing your grip on reality. We arrived at the airport at 6:15 in the morning. Terminal 3 was already crowded with early morning travelers, business people with tight connections, families beginning vacations. The whole choreography of modern travel playing out under fluorescent lights. Nathan parked in an accessible spot and retrieved the loaner wheelchair from the back. The moment I sat in it, I knew something was wrong. It did not fit right. The seat was too wide, the armrests at the wrong height. My pregnant belly made the position even more uncomfortable, putting pressure on my lower back in a way my custom chair never did. Nathan, this is awful. It doesn't fit right. It's just for an hour, he said, his tone suggesting I was being difficult. You'll be fine. Ashley appeared beside us, her smile warm and helpful. I'll help Mrs. Hayes. You go check in, Nathan. Get the boarding passes. They exchanged a look, brief but deliberate. Something passed between them that I was not meant to understand. Nathan disappeared toward the ticket counter with all the luggage, and Ashley positioned herself behind my wheelchair. Let's get you through security, she said brightly. It's always such a hassle, isn't it? All the lines in waiting. Something felt wrong, but I could not articulate what. Ashley was being helpful, friendly, efficient. There was no reason to feel the prickle of warning at the back of my neck. We made our way through the terminal. The wheelchair kept catching on things, the too wide frame clipping against people's bags, the wheels not responding the way I was used to. I felt clumsy, conspicuous, exactly the way I hated feeling. "Mrs. Hayes," Ashley said after a few minutes, "let me take you to the family restroom before Nathan's flight boards. You'll want to go now. The lines get crazy once we're closer to departure." It was practical advice, reasonable. I nodded. The family restroom was a single occupancy space, accessible, with grab bars and plenty of room to maneuver. Ashley helped me to the door. "I can manage from here," I said. "Of course." Her smile was genuine, or at least it looked genuine. "I'll wait right outside with the chair. Take your time." The door closed behind me. I was alone in the quiet space, the sounds of the terminal muffled. I used the facilities, washed my hands, checked my reflection in the mirror. I looked tired, worried. 8 months pregnant and fighting the feeling that my entire life was about to change. I opened the door. Ashley was gone. So was my wheelchair. For a moment, I just stood there, not understanding. Maybe she had stepped away for a second. Maybe she was getting coffee. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. "Ashley?" I called out. "Hello? The door was stuck. Ashley?" No response. The terminal hummed with activity around me. Hundreds of people moving through space, all of them with places to be, and none of them noticing the pregnant woman in the doorway of the family restroom, alone and without her mobility device. I tried to walk. After 3 years of using a wheelchair full-time, my legs had atrophied. I could stand for short periods, could take a few steps with support, but walking any distance was impossible. Add 35 pounds of pregnancy weight, and my body simply could not do what I was asking it to do. I took 3 steps. My left leg buckled. I caught myself on the wall, breathing hard. Gate B7 was 200 feet away. The announcement system crackled to life. "This is the final boarding call for Flight 217 to Paris, Charles de Gaulle. All passengers should be at the gate." I pulled out my phone with shaking hands, called Nathan. It went straight to voicemail. Called again. "The number you are trying to reach is unavailable." He had blocked me. The realization hit like ice water. This was not an accident. This was not Ashley being careless or losing track of me. This was planned, every detail. The loaner wheelchair that did not fit, the suggestion to use the restroom, the disappearance, the blocked phone. Nathan had orchestrated this. I looked down the terminal toward Gate B7. 200 feet, 50-some yards. The distance a person could walk in 30 seconds. For me, it might as well have been miles. I had a choice to make. I could call for help, hope that someone would believe me, that security would intervene, that there would be time to stop Nathan before he left. Or I could do it myself. I lowered myself to the ground. It was not graceful. My pregnant belly made everything awkward, my center of gravity all wrong. But I got down, hands on cold tile, and I started to crawl. The first few feet were the hardest. Not physically, though that was difficult enough, but mentally, emotionally. I was a 32-year-old woman, 8 months pregnant, crawling across an airport floor. Every cell in my body screamed that this was wrong, humiliating, impossible. But my baby was depending on me, my daughter. Grace, I'd already named her, already talked to her every night, already promised her that I would protect her. So I crawled. People noticed. Of course they noticed. A pregnant woman on her hands and knees in Terminal 3 at 6:45 in the morning was not something you could miss. A teenage girl saw me first. She grabbed her friend's arm, pointed. They stared for a moment, then kept walking. "Should we help her?" the friend asked. "Someone else will," the first girl said. "Come on, we'll miss our flight." A businessman in expensive shoes stepped around me without breaking stride. A woman gasped, put her hand to her mouth, then hurried past. A teenager started toward me, his face concerned. "Miss, do you need—" His mother grabbed his arm. "Don't get involved, Tyler. Come on." An airport employee, a janitor with a mop and bucket, stood 40 feet away. He watched me crawl, did nothing. Later, he would claim he thought it was a medical training exercise. My hands landed in something sticky, spilled soda, coffee, the residue of thousands of travelers. The smell made me gag. I was 8 months pregnant, in morning sickness had never fully left. I swallowed hard and kept moving. Contractions started, stress-induced, brought on by the physical exertion and the emotional trauma. They rippled across my abdomen, not regular labor, but my body's way of saying this was too much. Stop. Please stop. I did not stop. A man approached. He was in his 30s, carrying a laptop bag, concern written across his face. He knelt beside me. Ma'am, what's happening? Do you need help? My wheelchair, I gasped. That woman took my wheelchair. My husband. I need to get to gate B7. I'm calling security. He pulled out his phone. No, there's no time. Just help me up, please. But before he could, a security guard arrived. Officer Marcus Reynolds, 50-something, kind face, a father's concern in his eyes. Ma'am, what happened? My husband's assistant took my wheelchair, I said, the words tumbling out between breaths. I can't walk. I need to get to gate B7. My husband. Ma'am, Officer Reynolds said gently, your husband's companion informed us that you wanted to do this yourself. Some kind of independence training program? The words hit me like a physical blow. They had told security in advance. They had covered their story, made it look like this was my choice. What? No, I'm 8 months pregnant. I can't walk. This isn't training. This is... But I saw it in his eyes, the doubt, the confusion. He did not know who to believe. I looked past him, 80 feet ahead, and saw them. Nathan and Ashley boarding through the gate. Ashley was pushing my wheelchair. She was wearing a diamond bracelet on her left wrist, and even from this distance, I could see it catching the light. $15,000. The bracelet I had never seen. She was wearing it now, boarding a plane to Paris with my husband while I crawled across an airport floor. Nathan, I screamed. Nathan, please. He stopped, turned, our eyes met across the terminal. For a moment, I thought he would come back, that whatever had possessed him would break, that the man I married would remember he loved me. His jaw tightened. Not guilt, annoyance. He said something to Ashley, turned back toward the jetway. Nathan, I can't walk, please. He reached the gate agent, a young woman who looked between him and me with clear discomfort. His voice carried across the terminal. I'm sorry, my wife is very emotional lately. Pregnancy, I have to board. She'll be fine. Sir, maybe you should. She does this for attention. I'll see her when I get back. He boarded. The jetway pulled back. The plane began to taxi. I watched from the floor, hands on sticky tile, the man I married disappearing into the sky while I lay broken at his feet. Officer Reynolds was calling for medical assistance. Other travelers had stopped, forming a crowd. Someone was recording on their phone, and then I felt it. Warm fluid spreading beneath me. I looked down. My water had broken. I'm in labor, I said quietly. He left me in labor. Officer Reynolds' face went pale. He spoke into his radio. Need medical at Terminal B, female passenger, pregnant, water broke, possible premature labor. The man who had knelt beside me earlier, the one with the laptop bag, was still recording. His name was David Clark, though I would not learn that until later. He was a journalist, and he was capturing everything. People gathered, stared. Some offered help. Most just watched, the way people watch accidents, grateful it is not happening to them. An ambulance arrived. EMTs loaded me onto a stretcher. My phone was buzzing constantly. Diane calling. I answered with a shaking hand. Diane, where are you? I've been calling for an hour. I went to your house. I'm in an ambulance. My voice sounded dead, even to me. Nathan left me at the airport. He just left. What do you mean left? I was crawling across the floor, 8 months pregnant, crawling, and he walked away. Silence on the other end. Then, I'm coming to the hospital. Don't talk to anyone except medical staff. I'm calling Patricia Morrison right now. Who's that? The best divorce attorney in the state. The ambulance doors closed. Through the window, I could see people still filming. The story was already beginning, the video already uploading. By the time we reached the hospital, I would be viral. But I did not know that yet. In that moment, all I knew was that the man I loved had orchestrated my humiliation, left me on an airport floor, and walked away without looking back. And I knew with absolute certainty that he would try to take my baby from me. The fight was just beginning. The emergency room at Memorial Hospital was bright and cold and smelled like antiseptic and fear. Dr. Sullivan was already there when I arrived, having been called by the EMTs. She examined me quickly, efficiently, her professional mask firmly in place, even though I could see the fury in her eyes. "Contractions every 15 minutes, she said, checking the monitor. "We're going to stop labor with medication. You're at 36 weeks. Baby would probably be fine, but let's keep her in there a bit longer if we can." "How high?" I asked, knowing what she was checking. "Your blood pressure is 160 over 98. Charlotte, this is dangerously high. This level of stress could kill you or the baby." What happened at that airport is not just emotional trauma, it's a medical crisis. Diane burst through the door before I could respond. Behind her was a woman I had never seen before. She was in her early 50s, silver hair cut in a sharp bob, wearing a Navy power suit and carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my first car. "Mrs. Hayes," the woman said, her voice crisp and authoritative. "I'm Patricia Morrison. Your friend retained me. Before we begin, I need you to understand something. Do not sign anything. Anything. Do not respond to any communication from your husband or his lawyers. Everything goes through me. Understood? I don't have money for, we'll discuss payment later. Right now, I need to know. Has he sent you anything?" I checked my phone with shaking hands. 4 missed calls from an unknown number. 1 voicemail. 3 texts. The voicemail was from a woman named Jennifer Blake, Nathan's attorney. Her voice was smooth, professional, and utterly without sympathy. "Mrs. Hayes, this is Jennifer Blake from Hayes & Associates legal team. Mr. Hayes has asked me to inform you of contractual obligations in your prenuptial agreement. Papers were messengered to your residence this morning. You must sign by 5 p.m. today or forfeit all prenup protections, including medical trust access. This is your final notice." Patricia's jaw tightened. "They're threatening you while you're in the hospital in premature labor. Forward me everything, don't respond." "What papers?" I asked. "What medical trust?" "Your husband controls a $2 million medical trust for your disability-related expenses," Patricia said, pulling up documents on her tablet. "Every surgery, wheelchair repair, therapy session requires his approval. He's been denying non-essential requests for 8 months. You didn't realize because he told you insurance denied them." The room spun. "He controls my medical care?" "He set it up after your accident, ostensibly to help you, actually to maintain control. Charlotte, this man has been systematically isolating you, controlling you, and preparing to discard you for months. Probably longer." Diane sat on the edge of my hospital bed, taking my hand. "We're going to fight him, Char. We're going to destroy him." 2 hours later, I was discharged from the hospital with strict orders to rest, monitor my blood pressure, and avoid stress. The irony was not lost on any of us. We went to Diane's apartment because I could not face going home. My house, with all its perfect accessibility features, suddenly felt like the cage Diane had called it. Beautiful, expensive, designed to keep me comfortable and completely under Nathan's control. Diane's dining table became a war room. Patricia spread documents across the surface while I sat in the borrowed wheelchair, trying to process the fact that my entire marriage had been a lie. "This prenup," Patricia said, turning her tablet toward me, "is one of the most unconscionable documents I've ever seen. If you divorce before the baby turns 1, you get $50,000 in supervised visitation. He keeps everything, the house, the accounts, the company, and this clause on page 24." She zoomed in on a section of dense legal text. "In the event of divorce, wife agrees to fitness evaluation by court-appointed medical professionals to determine capability for independent parenting. Evaluation to include physical capability assessment, mental health screening, and home safety inspection." That's disability discrimination. Diane said, her voice shaking with anger. That's illegal. It's buried in legal language presented as standard custody protocol, Patricia said. But yes, it's designed to use her disability against her. Charlotte, did you have independent legal counsel when you signed this? Nathan said we didn't need lawyers fighting. He said lawyers create conflict where there isn't any. He said we trusted each other. The shame in my voice was audible. How could I have been so stupid? So naive. He's been planning this since your accident, Patricia said quietly. Maybe longer. Courts usually uphold prenups unless we can prove coercion, fraud, or that you didn't understand what you were signing. The disability angle might be our way in, but it's a long shot. There was a knock at the door. Diane checked the peephole, then opened it. David Clark stood there, the journalist from the airport. He was carrying a laptop and looked like he had not slept. Mrs. Hayes, he said, I'm David Clark. I recorded what happened at the airport. 8 minutes of footage, multiple angles. I need your permission to publish. Why would you help me? I asked. Because what I witnessed was abuse, and I'm tired of watching powerful men get away with it. Patricia looked at me. Charlotte, if we go public, there's no taking it back. Nathan will retaliate. He'll try to make you look unstable, attention-seeking. It will get ugly. It's already ugly, I said. Publish it. The article went live at 6 p.m. Tech CEO abandons disabled pregnant wife at airport. The video was edited to protect my privacy, but showed enough. Me on the floor, the crawl, Nathan walking away. I lay with my wheelchair. By 7 p.m., it had 10,000 views. By 8 p.m., 50,000. By 10 p.m., 850,000. By midnight, 1.8 million. I sat in Diane's apartment watching the numbers climb, reading comments from strangers. This is disability discrimination. How is this man not in jail? Where are the criminal charges? His company stock needs to tank. I'm never buying from Hayes Technologies again. Anyone who sees this and doesn't help is complicit. The comments went on and on. Thousands of people outraged on my behalf. It felt surreal, validating, terrifying. My phone exploded. Media requests, interview offers, messages from people I had not spoken to in years. I always knew something was wrong with him. We should have seen it. I'm so sorry we didn't help sooner. The news was reporting it. Hayes Technologies stock dropped 8% in after-hours trading. Patricia stayed with us, coordinating responses, fielding calls. At 2 in the morning, her phone rang. She answered, listened, then smiled grimly. Nathan's lawyers want to settle. They're offering to negotiate substantial terms to resolve this matter quietly. What does that mean? I asked. It means we're winning. It means he's scared. For the first time since the airport, I let myself feel something other than despair. Hope, fragile and tentative, but there we were going to fight, and we might actually win. The next 48 hours felt like being in the eye of a hurricane. The public was on my side. The video had gone viral enough that major news outlets picked it up. My story was everywhere. Patricia's phone rang constantly with updates. 2 board members publicly called for Nathan's resignation. Hayes Technologies lost $32 million in market cap. The judge granted an emergency restraining order. Nathan can't come within 500 feet of you. His lawyers reached out again. Quote, client is willing to negotiate substantial settlement to resolve this matter quietly. Diane brought her kids over, and for the first time in days, I heard myself laugh. Sophie, age 7, made me a card with crayon drawings of me and baby Grace. Jake, age 5, told me very seriously that he would punch the bad man if he tried to hurt me again. You're so brave, Aunt Charlotte, Sophie said, her small hand on my arm. My mom says you're a warrior. A warrior. I had never thought of myself that way. I was just a woman trying to keep her baby. But maybe that was what warriors were. People who fought not because they were fearless, but because they had something worth fighting for. Patricia arrived with coffee and a tablet full of documents. Charlotte, I think we have him. Look at this. She showed me the developments. 3 other women had come forward with stories about Nathan, not disability-related, but patterns of control, manipulation, emotional abuse. One ex-girlfriend from college, a former employee, a woman he dated before me. The pattern was clear. Nathan did not suddenly become abusive after my accident. He had always been this way. My disability just gave him more tools to use against me. The Disability Rights Coalition is offering to file an amicus brief supporting your case, Patricia said. And there's a GoFundMe for your legal fees. It's at $87,000 in 12 hours. People I don't even know are helping me, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Because what happened to you could happen to anyone with a disability, Patricia said. You're not just fighting for yourself anymore. You're fighting for everyone the system has failed it. That evening, I went back to my house for the first time since the airport. Walking in felt strange, like visiting a museum of my former life. Everything was exactly as I left it, but nothing felt the same. Diane helped me set up the nursery. We assembled the crib, hung tiny clothes in the closet, arranged stuffed animals on shelves. I had been too afraid to complete these tasks before, worried that I was tempting fate. Now, with legal momentum on our side, I let myself believe it might actually happen. I folded a onesie, soft yellow fabric with a duck embroidered on the front, and felt tears streaming down my face. I was so scared I'd never get to use this room, I said. You're going to use it, Diane said firmly. You and baby Grace. Grace Charlotte Hayes, I said. Grace because that's what I'm giving myself. Grace for not seeing it sooner. Grace for being human. And Charlotte because I want her to know her mother was strong enough to fight. You're going to be an amazing mom. We hugged, and for a moment, everything felt possible. That night, I recorded a video message on my phone. Just me, talking to my daughter. Hi, baby Grace, it's Mama. Today I'm setting up your room, and I really think we're going to be okay. Your daddy tried to take you from me, but I fought back, and I think I won. I smiled at the camera, a real smile, the first in weeks. I went to sleep that night in my own bed, in my accessible room, with baby Grace moving inside me. My blood pressure had dropped to 130/85. Still elevated, but better. I slept peacefully for the first time in months. The next morning, everything fell apart. I woke to my phone exploding with notifications. 73 missed calls. Texts flooding in faster than I could read them. Diane banging on my door at 7 in the morning, her face pale. Don't look at the news, she said. Patricia's coming over. Don't look. Of course I looked. The headlines were everywhere. Disabled woman's exploitation scheme exposed. New York Post. Tech CEO's wife staged airport incident, sources say. Business Insider. Was viral video a setup? Experts weigh in. CNN. Charlotte Hayes, victim or manipulator? Fox News. Nathan had hired a crisis management team, the best in the country, and overnight they had rewritten the narrative. There was a professional website, The Truth About Charlotte Hayes. It featured photos of me at charity galas, smiling and dressed up. The implication was clear. If I could attend fancy parties, how disabled could I really be? Doctor statements from physicians I had never met, claiming I had a history of attention-seeking behavior and documented emotional instability. Character witnesses, paid handsomely I would later learn, swearing that I was always dramatic and always needed to be the center of attention. The specific claims made my stomach turn. Charlotte refused accessible transportation Nathan offered. She insisted on coming to the airport against medical advice. She has documented history of emotional instability per medical records. The prenup was Charlotte's idea to protect her medical needs. Nathan is devastated by her betrayal and manipulation. 3 airport employees had given statements. None of them were Officer Reynolds, the kind security guard who actually helped me. These were different people, and their stories contradicted everything that had happened. An airport janitor. Mrs. Hayes was behaving erratically, screaming. I observed her refusing help from multiple passengers. She appeared to be creating a scene. A gate agent. Mr. Hayes seemed very concerned about his wife's behavior. He tried to help her, but she was yelling at him. He was in tears when he boarded. An airport security guard, not Reynolds. We were informed by Mr. Hayes' assistant that Mrs. Hayes was participating in an independence training program. Her therapist had recommended she practice mobility without her wheelchair. We were told to give her space. That's a lie, I said to Patricia when she arrived an hour later. All of it. I never refused help. There was no training program. They made this up. I know, Patricia said grimly, and Nathan paid them, $50,000 each. Our investigator found the wire transfers. Can't we prove it's fake? We can try, but Charlotte, they're good at this. They've created just enough doubt that some people will believe them. She pulled up social media on her tablet. The comments section had shifted. Wait, maybe we got this wrong. She does look kind of dramatic. Why isn't her friend helping her? Something doesn't add up. If she can go to galas, she's not that disabled. Half the comments were still supportive, but half had turned suspicious. And that doubt was exactly what Nathan needed. Then came the edited video. Someone had taken David's footage and recut it. The new version showed me yelling, but removed the context of me screaming Nathan's name. It showed security helping me up, but cut the 10 minutes of crawling before that. It showed Nathan looking concerned at the gate from an angle that made it impossible to see him walking away. The new video was titled Full Context, What Really Happened at Airport, and had 500,000 views in 3 hours. They're rewriting what happened, I said, staring at the screen. People believe it. Some people, Patricia said. Not everyone, but enough to create doubt. Then came the worst part, the morning talk show interview with Ashley. She wore a demure dress, minimal makeup, and cried on camera. The female host was sympathetic, almost protective. I tried to help Mrs. Hayes, Ashley said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I really did. I took her wheelchair to the gate to clear a path through the crowds. I thought she was right behind me. When I realized she wasn't there, I tried to go back, but Mr. Hayes said we needed to board. He said Charlotte was independent and capable, that she would be fine. And the bracelet everyone is talking about? The host asked gently. It was a gift from Mr. Hayes for my work anniversary. That's all. Charlotte has accused me of terrible things, but I've only ever tried to help her. I think, her voice broke convincingly, I think her disability has made her very insecure, and pregnancy hormones have made it worse. I feel terrible for her. I watched the interview with Diane and Patricia, my hands shaking. She's lying, as I said. She's sitting there lying, and people believe her. Not everyone, Diane said, but her voice lacked conviction. My phone rang. Patricia's paralegal. We have a problem, the paralegal said. Patricia put it on speaker. What now? Nathan just filed an emergency custody motion. Hearing in 48 hours. The room went silent. Then Patricia swore, which was the first time I had heard her break her professional composure. Send me the filing, she said. Now. The document came through on her tablet. She read it aloud, her voice tight with controlled fury. Motion for emergency temporary custody. Grounds: 1. Mother is mentally unstable. Documented erratic behavior. Public outbursts. 2. Mother is physically incapable of caring for infant due to mobility disability. 3. Mother is endangering unborn child through elevated stress and refusal of medical care. 4. Mother has history of attention-seeking behavior, including staging public incidents. 5. Mother's disability requires full-time assistance she cannot afford without access to medical trust, which father controls. He's trying to take her from the hospital, I said, my voice hollow. The second she's born. Yes, Patricia said. She scrolled further. And Charlotte, there's expert testimony. Dr. Ronald Mitchell, pediatric specialist, who has never met you, says, quote, in my professional opinion, a mother with significant mobility impairment cannot safely care for a newborn without full-time assistance. Risks include inability to respond to infant emergencies, dropping baby during transfer from wheelchair, inability to chase mobile infant, inability to perform essential childcare tasks without adaptive equipment. That's not true, I said. I've taken classes. I've prepared. I know, but this is a paid expert. Nathan can afford the best. There was more. Psychiatric testimony from a doctor. Sandra Williams, who had also never met me, claiming I showed signs of paranoid ideation, attention-seeking behavior, and emotional dysregulation. And then the final blow. They had subpoenaed Dr. Sullivan's records. They found your sessions where you discussed marriage problems, Patricia said carefully. where you told Rebecca about Nathan's distance, your suspicions of an affair. She read from Dr. Sullivan's notes. Patient reports increased anxiety about marriage. States husband is emotionally distant and she suspects he might be seeing someone. Patient crying during session. Discussed concern about raising baby alone if marriage ends. Patient appears emotionally fragile. Nathan's lawyers are calling this paranoid delusions, emotional instability, inability to cope with stress of impending motherhood, Patricia said. They're weaponizing your honesty. Every time you sought help, every time you admitted struggling, they're using it to paint you as unstable. I felt the trap closing around me. Every honest conversation with my doctor, now being used against me. Every moment I asked for help, now being called evidence of incapacity. What do we do? I asked. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. We fight. But Charlotte, I need you to understand something. Every move you make now can be weaponized. If you show emotion, they'll say you're unstable. If you stay calm, they'll say you're cold. If you fight publicly, they'll say you're attention-seeking. If you stay quiet, they'll say you're guilty. If you ask for help, they'll say you can't manage alone or so. If you do it alone, they'll say you're refusing needed assistance. It's impossible, Diane said. It's designed to be impossible. Yes, Patricia agreed. That's the point. Nathan doesn't need to prove Charlotte is unfit. He just needs to create enough doubt. My phone rang. Dr. Sullivan. Charlotte, she said, her voice heavy, I have to testify at the hearing. They subpoenaed me. I know. It's okay, Rebecca. You'll tell the truth. That's the problem. The truth is that your blood pressure is dangerously high, that you've been under extreme stress, that you checked yourself out of the hospital last week against medical advice. Charlotte, when I tell the truth on that stand, it's going to hurt you. I understood then. Even my allies would damage my case by being honest. That night, alone in Diane's guest room, I sat with my hands on my pregnant belly and tried to figure out how to win an unwinnable game. I recorded another video, this time not hopeful, this time terrified. Grace, baby Grace, it's Mama. Tomorrow there's a hearing where they'll decide if I get to keep you, and I'm scared. Your father called me a burden. He said taking care of me was dealing with me. He told people I was an inconvenience he tolerated. But I want you to know you are not an inconvenience. You are everything. And if they take you from me, it's not because I'm not capable. It's because the system protects men with money over women with disabilities. If you grow up without me, I want you to know I fought. I loved you before you were even born. I'm so sorry I'm not stronger. I stopped recording, curled up in the wheelchair, passed out from exhaustion. Diane found me at 2 in the morning, unconscious. My blood pressure at 168/98. She called 911, but I woke before the ambulance arrived. No hospital, I said, panic in my voice. If I go, Nathan's lawyers will use it. They'll say I'm having a breakdown. If you don't go, you could die. If I go, I lose Grace. Diane was crying. Char, you can't win if you're dead. Call Patricia, not 911. Call Patricia. It was 3 in the morning. We were 48 hours from a hearing that would determine whether I kept my baby. And I had just passed out from stress. Nathan was winning. Patricia arrived at 3:30 in the morning with a mobile nurse who checked my vitals and started an IV to bring down my blood pressure. We sat in Diane's living room, the only sounds the quiet beep of the blood pressure monitor and the distant hum of traffic outside. At 3:45, Patricia's phone rang. She checked the screen, frowned. It's Michael Pearson, Nathan's business partner. She looked at me. He requested this meeting through encrypted email 2 hours ago, said he has evidence. I vetted him. He's legitimate, but could be a trap, Diane finished. Could be, Patricia agreed. Charlotte, it's your call. I thought about Michael. I had met him at a company fundraiser 2 weeks before the airport incident. His daughter Emma, 16 years old, used a wheelchair. We had talked for almost an hour about accessible design, about the way people either stared or pretended not to see you, about the small daily indignities that came with disability. Nathan had pulled me away from that conversation, told me I was making a scene with the wheelchair girl, and Michael had overheard. Let him in, I said. 3 minutes later, Michael Pearson stood in Diane's living room. He looked like he had not slept in days. He carried a laptop and a folder thick with documents. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, "I owe you an apology. A massive apology. You're Nathan's partner. Why are you here?" "Because I have a daughter, Emma. You met her. She's 16, has cerebral palsy, uses a wheelchair." He pulled up a photo on his phone. Emma painting, her smile bright. "At that fundraiser, Nathan said something about her, about you. I overheard it, and I should have said something then, but I didn't. After what he did to you at the airport, I can't stay silent anymore." He pulled out his phone and played a recording. Nathan's voice, clear and distinct. "Michael really shouldn't bring the wheelchair girl to corporate events. It makes everyone uncomfortable. Clients don't want to see that." Michael's voice on the recording. "That's my daughter, Nathan. Nathan, I know, and I'm sorry about her situation, but it's unprofessional. These events are about projecting success, strength, not disability." Michael, "Emma is successful. She's an artist." Nathan, "She's in a wheelchair, Michael. That's what people see. Same with Charlotte Shauna. That's all anyone sees, the wheelchair. It's a reminder of weakness, and weakness is bad for business." The recording stopped. Silence filled the room. "I should have ended our partnership that night," Michael said quietly, "but I didn't. I told myself he was just saying stupid things. Then I saw the airport video, and I knew." Patricia leaned forward. "What do you have, Michael?" He opened his laptop. "I've been Nathan's business partner for 12 years. I have access to company servers, shared documents, his calendar. For the past 48 hours, I've been collecting evidence." The first file he showed us was an email chain from 6 months earlier. To Jennifer Blake, Nathan's attorney, from Nathan Hayes. Subject, preparing for divorce. "Jennifer, Charlotte is pregnant, due date March 15th. I need to understand my options for divorce post-birth. Specifically, how do I prove she's incapable of parenting due to her disability? What documentation do I need? Can we argue that a wheelchair user cannot safely care for an infant?" Jennifer's response was clinical. "Nathan, we need to be careful here. Disability discrimination is a major legal risk. However, if we can document a pattern of dependence, instances where Charlotte required assistance and couldn't perform tasks independently, we can argue fitness concerns. I recommend you start documenting now. Every time you help her with something, note it. Every time she seems overwhelmed, document it. Build the pattern before birth." I read the email 3 times. This was 6 months ago, when I was 3 months pregnant. He was planning this before I even showed. "Yes," Michael said. He pulled up more files. Financial records. Nathan transferred $8.2 million to offshore accounts over 6 months. But look at the timeline. The spreadsheet showed the dates. October 15th, Charlotte announces pregnancy. October 18th, first offshore transfer, $500,000. October 22nd, Nathan books Paris hotel 8 months in advance. November through February, monthly transfers of 1 to 1.5 million in March 1st. Final transfer, 2.7 million March 12th. Airport incident. "He was systematically hiding money the moment you announced the pregnancy," Michael said. "He knew exactly what he was doing." Patricia was making notes rapidly, her professional composure cracking. "This is conspiracy. This is premeditated fraud." "There's more," Michael said. He pulled up Nathan's calendar, synchronized with the company server. Every late work meeting corresponded to a dinner reservation for 2 with Ashley. Every investor call was a spa day. Every conference in Seattle was a weekend in wine country. Then Michael showed us text messages between Nathan and Ashley from 2 weeks before the airport. "Ashley, are you sure about the airport plan? It seems cruel." Nathan, "It needs to be public and humiliating. That way no one believes her when she fights back. Who sides with a woman who caused a scene at an airport?" Ashley, "What about the baby?" Nathan, "The baby is mine. She's just the incubator, and a defective one at that." Ashley, "Jesus, Nathan. Nathan, don't get soft on me now. After Paris, everything changes. Trust me." My hands were shaking. "Defective incubator." "I'm sorry," Michael said. "I'm so sorry." Patricia was reading through the files. This is conspiracy, all of it. Michael, how did you access these? I'm a partner. I have legal access to company servers for transparency. Nathan's company calendar, company email, company text system, all accessible to partners. Then it's admissible. Patricia smiled grimly. This changes everything. Michael pulled up one more file. Browser history from Nathan's laptop. This is the worst one, he said. The Google searches were damning. October 16th, the day after I announced my pregnancy. How to prove wife is unfit mother. Can wheelchair user be denied custody? Disability-based custody laws. October 20th. Best disability discrimination lawyers. How to document wife's dependence. Can I take baby from hospital if mother is disabled? November 3rd. Offshore accounts divorce. How to hide assets from disabled spouse. January 15th. Staging public incident for custody. How to make wife look unstable. February 28th, 2 weeks before the airport. Airport security procedures disabled passengers. How long can someone crawl before medical emergency? I read the last search again. He researched how long I could crawl before something bad happened. He was calculating, Diane said, her voice shaking, how much he could hurt you without killing you. Michael looked at me, guilt written across his face. Mrs. Hayes, I should have seen this. Should have known. But last week, Emma asked me something. She said, Dad, if something happened to Mom, would you still love me? Would you still want me? His voice broke. I said, of course, baby, always. And she said, then why does Mr. Hayes hate his wife for being disabled? Why does he think Charlotte is less than? Does he think I'm less than? He took a breath. My 16-year-old daughter asked me if she's less than because she uses a wheelchair, because of what she heard Nathan say, about you, about her. And I realized, by staying silent, I was telling her it's okay, that men like Nathan get away with it, that disability is shameful. I can't tell my daughter to be proud of who she is if I don't have the courage to stand up when it matters. Patricia spoke carefully. Michael, by bringing this to us, you're ending your business partnership, possibly opening yourself to legal retaliation. I know, but I'd rather lose a business than lose my daughter's respect. Mrs. Hayes, what Nathan did is unforgivable. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Patricia stood. Okay, here's what we have. Michael's testimony, text messages proving premeditation, financial records proving fraud, Google search history proving intent, calendar evidence proving the affair timeline, recording proving Nathan's disability animus, the original unedited airport video. This is a slam dunk. Nathan's lawyers have no idea we have this. They think we're coming in with just the viral video and emotional testimony. We're about to destroy him. I looked at Patricia. So I'm going to keep Grace? Charlotte, after I present this evidence, Nathan's lucky if he gets supervised visitation. He committed fraud, conspiracy, and disability discrimination. The criminal charges alone could put him away for 3 to 5 years. It was the first real hope I had felt in days. Diane hugged me. Patricia was already on her phone coordinating with her team. We got him, Diane said. We actually got him. By 6 in the morning, Patricia's entire legal team was assembled in her office. 3 associate attorneys, a paralegal, an investigator. Evidence laid out on the conference table. My blood pressure had finally stabilized. 3 things happened overnight because of the public pressure, Patricia said, showing me her tablet. First, corporate pressure. 2 more board members called for Nathan's resignation. Hayes Technologies lost $32 million in market cap. Second, legal momentum. Judge granted an emergency restraining order expansion. Nathan can't contact you at all without court permission. Third, public support. The GoFundMe for your legal fees is at $87,000. Disability Rights Coalition is filing an amicus brief. 3 other women came forward with Nathan's stories. She looked at me seriously. Charlotte, I think we have him. He's scared. Men like Nathan don't settle unless they know they're going to lose. I allowed myself to hope, really hope. We went back to my house so I could get clothes for the hearing. Diane helped me set up the nursery. We folded tiny baby clothes, arranged stuffed animals, hung the mobile above the changing table. I was so scared I'd never get to use this room, I said. You're going to use it. You and baby Grace. Grace Charlotte Hayes. Grace for giving myself grace. Charlotte because I want her to know her mother was strong enough to fight. I recorded another video message, this one filled with hope. Hi, baby Grace. It's Mama. This is March 13th, 7 a.m., the day we fought back and won. The day your mama stopped being a victim and became a warrior. I love you, baby girl. We're going to be okay. Patricia texted, Car's here. It's time. I took a deep breath, wheeled myself to the door. We were going to court. We were going to win. The courthouse was surrounded by media trucks, cameras everywhere, people shouting questions. Patricia had security escort us through a side entrance. The courtroom was packed. Judge Catherine Hartford presiding, 58 years old, stern reputation but fair. Nathan's legal team had 4 lawyers. Nathan sat at their table in a perfect suit, playing the devastated husband. His mother, Evelyn, was in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. The performance was elaborate. Judge Hartford called the court to order. This is an emergency custody hearing regarding the unborn child of Charlotte and Nathan Hayes. Mr. Bradley, you filed the motion. Present your case. James Bradley, Nathan's lead attorney, stood. Silver-haired, expensive suit, the kind of lawyer who made juries forget they were being manipulated. Your Honor, we're here because we're gravely concerned about the welfare of an unborn child. Mrs. Hayes' recent behavior demonstrates significant instability. He presented their case, the airport incident, their version, medical concerns, disability limitations. Patricia objected. Your Honor, counsel is presenting a false narrative. We have evidence that the airport incident was premeditated by Mr. Hayes. You'll have opportunity to present evidence, Ms. Morrison. Mr. Bradley, continue. Bradley called Nathan to testify. Nathan's performance was flawless. Concerned husband, devoted father-to-be, worried about his unstable wife. I love Charlotte. When she had her accident 3 years ago, I was devastated. But I stayed. I modified our entire home. $300,000 in accessibility renovations. I've supported her medical care, her therapy, everything. And the airport incident? Bradley asked. Charlotte insisted on coming. I tried to talk her out of it. She's 8 months pregnant. Airports are stressful. But she insisted. Ashley was trying to help her. I had to board my flight. I thought she'd be fine. I never imagined she'd turn this into a media spectacle to hurt me. His voice broke convincingly. The performance was worthy of an award. Patricia stood. Your Honor, I'd like to cross-examine. Proceed. Patricia approached Nathan like a predator circling prey. Mr. Hayes, when did you book your Paris trip? I don't recall exactly. Let me refresh your memory. October 22nd, 8 months ago, 1 week after your wife told you she was pregnant. I booked many business trips in advance. 2 adjoining rooms, for you and your assistant. Standard business practice? Nathan's lawyer objected. Patricia pushed forward. The cross-examination was brutal. Patricia dismantled Nathan piece by piece, revealing the jewelry, the affair, the offshore accounts. Then she went for the kill. Mr. Hayes, did you or did you not text Ashley 2 weeks before the airport incident? And I quote, "The baby is mine. She's just the incubator. A defective one at that?" Explosion in the courtroom. Nathan tried to deny it. Patricia produced the texts. What context makes calling your disabled wife defective acceptable? Nathan lost his composure. I was frustrated. I've been taking care of Charlotte for 3 years. Everything. She can't do anything herself because you wouldn't let her. You controlled every aspect of her life. You made her dependent, then used that dependence as evidence she's incapable. I made her comfortable. I gave her everything. You built her a cage. Patricia entered all of Michael's evidence into the record. The emails, the financial records, the search history, the texts. Nathan's lawyer scrambled, objecting. But the evidence was solid, legal, devastating. I watched Nathan's facade crack. We were winning. But then his lawyer stood. Your Honor, we moved to exclude Exhibits A through E. My heart stopped. Judge Hartford looked up from her tablet. On what grounds? Nathan's lawyer, a sharp woman named Jennifer Blake, approached the bench. The evidence was obtained by Mr. Pearson without Mr. Hayes' explicit consent. While Mr. Pearson had access to company servers, he used that access to gather evidence specifically to harm his business partner. This violates corporate espionage laws and attorney-client privilege. Your Honor, Patricia said, Mr. Pearson is a partner with legal access. For business purposes, Jennifer interrupted, not to weaponize private communications in a personal legal matter. Your Honor, if you allow this evidence, you set a precedent that business partners can spy on each other and steal privileged communications for use in custody disputes. The judge was silent for a long moment, the kind of silence that made my stomach drop. Ms. Morrison, she finally said, as much as I find this evidence compelling, Mr. Bradley raises a valid point. Mr. Pearson accessed these files for the specific purpose of harming Mr. Hayes in a custody dispute. That crosses the line from legal access to misappropriation. Your Honor, this evidence proves, I know what it proves, Counselor, but I cannot allow evidence obtained through questionable means, or every business partner would weaponize corporate access against colleagues. The evidence is excluded. The words hit me like a physical blow. Excluded. All of it. The emails proving premeditation. The search history showing intent. The text calling me defective. Gone. Your Honor, Patricia said, her voice strained, without this evidence, we have no proof of premeditation. Then you'll need to make your case without it. We'll reconvene after lunch, 3-hour recess. The gavel fell. In the attorney conference room in the courthouse basement, Patricia paced like a caged animal. Michael sat with his head in his hands. Diane was on her phone, and from her tone, something was very wrong. We still have the original video, Patricia said. We still have Dr. Sullivan's testimony. We still have... Her phone rang. She listened, and I watched her face fall. There's another problem, she said after hanging up. Diane ended her call at the same moment, tears streaming down her face. Shar, she said, I have to leave. What? The hearing restarts in 3 hours. My ex just filed for emergency custody of Sophie and Jake, claims I've been neglecting them to help you. The hearing is in 2 hours across town. If I don't show up, I could lose them. The room tilted. He's lying. It's Nathan, Patricia said, checking her phone. He hired your ex's lawyer. He's using Diane against you. Diane grabbed my hand. Charlotte, if it were Grace, you'd understand. I have to go to protect my babies. Go, I said, my voice hollow. Of course, go. She left, sobbing, and suddenly I was down my best friend, the person who had been my rock through all of this. Patricia was still on her phone, her expression growing darker. The court medic is here. Charlotte, you need to be examined before the hearing resumes. Why? Oh, it's standard procedure given your pregnancy and the stress of... I doubled over. A contraction, hard and sudden. Patricia caught me. Charlotte? I'm fine, I gasped. It's just stress. It'll pass. Another contraction, 90 seconds after the first. That was 90 seconds apart, Patricia said. The court medic rushed in, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and firm hands. She examined me quickly. Ma'am, you're in early labor. You need to go to the hospital. I can't. If I leave this courthouse, Nathan's lawyers will say I abandoned the hearing. They'll get temporary custody by default. Ma'am, you're in active labor. Can you stop it? Can you give me something to stop it? Patricia gripped my shoulder. Charlotte, that's dangerous. More dangerous than losing my baby to Nathan? The medic looked between us. I can give you medication to stop labor temporarily, but it's risky. If something goes wrong, will something go wrong? Probably not, but possibly. And if it does, I have to report this to the court. The opposing counsel will use your choice to stop labor as evidence you prioritize the custody fight over your baby's health. The catch-22 was perfect. If I went to the hospital, Nathan got emergency custody. If I took medication to stay, they'd use it as proof I was endangering Grace. If I did nothing and went into full labor during the hearing, they'd say I was unstable. Every option was a trap. Give me the medication, I said. The medic administered the shot. My contractions slowed but didn't stop completely. Every 10 minutes now, manageable but present. a reminder that my body was trying to deliver this baby while I fought for the right to keep her. Patricia pulled me aside while the medic packed up. Charlotte, listen to me. If you go into full labor during this hearing, it will be bad. Really bad. Nathan's team will use it as evidence of exactly what they're claiming, that you're unstable, that you prioritize fighting over your baby's health. What's my alternative? Go to the hospital and let them take her? Or we try to settle. Right now, negotiate something better than the prenup, but avoid the trial. No, my voice was firm. I'm not giving Nathan anything. Not after what he did. We fight. Patricia nodded slowly. Then we fight with what we have. The video, Dr. Sullivan, your testimony, and we pray it's enough. But I could see in her eyes that she didn't think it would be. The hearing resumed at 1 p.m. I wheeled into the courtroom, moving carefully, trying to hide the contractions that were still coming every 10 minutes. Nathan sat at his table, his expression unreadable. Judge Hartford returned to the bench. Ms. Morrison, call your first witness. I call Charlotte Hayes. I wheeled to the witness stand. The bailiff helped position my wheelchair. I took the oath with a hand that shook only slightly. Patricia approached me gently. Charlotte, can you tell the court about your disability? I have an incomplete spinal cord injury from a car accident 3 years ago. I use a wheelchair for mobility, but I'm fully capable of— Mrs. Hayes, Judge Hartford interrupted. You don't need to defend your disability in my courtroom. What I want to know is, are you capable of caring for your child? The question was direct, honest. I appreciated it. Yes, Your Honor. I've been preparing for 8 months. Adaptive parenting classes, physical therapy to strengthen my core for lifting, modified nursery with accessible changing table and crib. I've researched, practiced, prepared. I'm ready. Have you prepared more than the average expectant mother? Yes, because I knew people would question me. I knew I'd have to prove myself twice as much. And Mr. Hayes, has he taken any parenting classes? Patricia stood. No, Your Honor. Has he modified his home for an infant? No, Your Honor. He doesn't even live with Mrs. Hayes. He maintains a separate penthouse apartment. Judge Hartford looked at Nathan's legal team. So let me understand. Mr. Hayes wants custody of an infant he has no space for, no training for, and no apparent bond with, while his wife has spent 8 months preparing every detail, and you're arguing she's unfit? Jennifer Blake stood. Your Honor, it's not about preparation. It's about physical capability. A wheelchair user simply cannot. Does Mr. Hayes have a uterus? The judge asked. The courtroom went silent. I'm sorry, Your Honor. Can Mr. Hayes breastfeed? Can he carry a child in his body for 9 months? Because if physical capability is our standard, he fails on multiple counts. Jennifer Blake sat down, her face flushed. Judge Hartford turned back to me. Mrs. Hayes, I have one question. Do you love your baby? My hand went to my belly, tears streamed down my face. More than anything. That's all I needed to hear. Step down. Patricia called Dr. Sullivan next. Rebecca took the stand, was sworn in, and Jennifer Blake immediately went on the attack. Dr. Sullivan, in your professional opinion, is Mrs. Hayes physically capable of caring for an infant? Yes. But she uses a wheelchair, which has nothing to do with her capability to parent. I've delivered babies for dozens of disabled mothers. They adapt, they problem solve. In many ways, they're better prepared than able-bodied mothers because they have to think ahead. But Mrs. Hayes' medical records show elevated stress, blood pressure issues, caused entirely by her husband's abuse. Dr. Sullivan's voice was steel. Every single medical issue Charlotte has experienced in this pregnancy is directly attributable to Mr. Hayes' systematic psychological torture. That's not a medical diagnosis. Yes, it is. It's called toxic stress. It causes preterm labor, preeclampsia, cardiovascular problems. Charlotte's body has been under attack for months, not because of her disability, but because of her husband's cruelty. Patricia stood. Dr. Sullivan, in your medical opinion, what is the greatest threat to this baby's health? Nathan Hayes. If Charlotte loses custody, the stress will likely kill her. And studies show babies separated from mothers immediately after birth have lifelong attachment issues. The safest place for this baby is with Charlotte. Jennifer Blake had no further questions. Then came Nathan's turn to present his case. He called his paid experts. The pediatric specialist, who had never met me, testifying about theoretical dangers. The psychiatrist who diagnosed me based on medical records alone. Their testimony was clinical, detached, and damning in its certainty. Wheelchair users couldn't respond quickly enough to infant emergencies. Mothers who sought help for anxiety were unstable. Women who confronted their husbands about affairs were paranoid. Each word built Nathan's case. Each professional opinion chipped away at mine. Then Jennifer Blake called Nathan back to the stand. "Mr. Hayes, you've heard Mrs. Hayes testify about her preparations. Do you believe she's capable of caring for your child alone?" "No," Nathan said, his voice heavy with false concern. "I love Charlotte, but her disability requires full-time assistance. She can't carry the baby and push her wheelchair at the same time. She can't chase a mobile infant. She needs help with basic daily activities. Without me, without access to the medical trust I control, she can't afford the care she needs, and our baby will suffer. Have you offered to provide that care?" "Of course, I've begged Charlotte to let me help, but since the airport incident, which I deeply regret, she's refused all contact. She's let her anger at me override what's best for our child." It was a masterful performance. Painting himself as the concerned father, me as the vindictive wife putting pride over the baby's welfare. Patricia cross-examined, but without Michael's evidence, she couldn't prove Nathan's words were lies. She could point to inconsistencies, but she couldn't prove premeditation. The hearing lasted until 6 p.m. By the end, I had been in court for 9 hours, had 4 more contractions I managed to hide, and watched Nathan systematically dismantle my case. Judge Hartford reviewed her notes. "This is a complex case. I need time to review all testimony before ruling. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for my decision. Court is adjourned." The gavel fell. That night in the courthouse bathroom, I sat alone in my wheelchair and faced the truth. We were losing. Patricia had done everything right. Dr. Sullivan had testified perfectly. I had been honest and prepared. But Nathan had more money, better experts, and a system that fundamentally doubted whether a disabled woman could be a good mother. I recorded what I thought might be my last video to Grace. "Hi, baby, it's Mama. It's midnight. In 9 hours, a judge decides if I keep you, and I'm scared. Your father researched how long I could crawl before I needed medical help. He calculated my pain. He weaponized my disability. And the worst part? The system is helping him. Because I asked my doctor for help and she had to write it down. Because I was honest about struggling and they used it against me. If you grow up without me, I want you to know, it wasn't because your mama was weak. It was because the system is rigged against disabled mothers. I love you. I'm so sorry I'm not stronger." I broke down crying, dropped my phone, curled up in my wheelchair. Diane had texted earlier, "Got my kids back. Nathan's lawyer dropped the case. But Char, I'm so sorry I couldn't be there." Patricia knocked on the bathroom door. "Charlotte, we need to talk about tomorrow." I opened the door. My face must have shown everything I was feeling because Patricia's professional mask slipped entirely. She knelt beside my wheelchair. "I know this seems hopeless, but we're not done. We present one more day of testimony, character witnesses, the unedited video. We remind the judge that Nathan walked away from his pregnant wife on an airport floor. We make her see who he really is." "Will it be enough?" Patricia hesitated. "I don't know, but Charlotte, we fight until the end. For Grace, you fight." I nodded. "For Grace." At 3 in the morning, Patricia called. "Charlotte, get to the courthouse. Now." What happened? Nathan collapsed. Panic attack. His lawyers called 911. He's being transported to the hospital. And Charlotte, he confessed. On the record, the court reporter was still there. He admitted to everything. I didn't understand. "What do you mean everything?" "Paying the witnesses, the scheme, all of it. The judge is reviewing the transcript right now. Get here. We might have just won." When I arrived at the courthouse at 4 in the morning, the hallways were chaos. EMTs loading Nathan onto a stretcher, his lawyers arguing with court officials. Media already gathering outside, somehow alerted to the drama. Patricia met me at the door. Nathan had a panic attack in the courtroom. Blood pressure 180 over 110. Not a heart attack, but serious. And Charlotte, when he collapsed, Ashley was there. He started ranting about how this was her fault, how she said you wouldn't fight back, how he paid people to lie. He said that out loud, with the court reporter still recording. He admitted to witness tampering, bribery, conspiracy, all on the record. I watched them load Nathan into the ambulance. Ashley climbed in with him, her face pale. For a moment, our eyes met across the hallway. I saw something there. Not quite guilt, not quite fear. Something between shame and defiance. Then the ambulance doors closed. Judge Hartford appeared, still in her robes despite the hour. Ms. Morrison, Mrs. Hayes, my chambers. Now. In the judge's chambers, she pulled up the court reporter's transcript on her computer. Read aloud the relevant section. Nathan Hayes during medical emergency. This is your fault. You said she wouldn't fight back. You said she'd sign quietly. You said if we made it public and humiliating enough, no one would believe her. I paid off those witnesses. I paid your firm $200,000 to bury her. And she's still here. She's still fighting. Your Honor, Patricia said carefully, this is a confession to multiple felonies. Yes, Judge Hartford said, it is, which creates an interesting legal situation. Mr. Hayes' attorneys will argue the statement was made under medical duress and should be inadmissible. They may be right. But combined with the other evidence, the pattern of behavior, the airport video, Dr. Sullivan's testimony, I have enough to make my ruling. She looked at me directly. Mrs. Hayes, I'm going to be honest with you. This case disturbed me from the beginning. The prenuptial agreement alone should never have been drafted, much less signed. The way Mr. Hayes' team tried to weaponize your disability against you was unconscionable. But I'm a judge, not a jury. I have to follow the law. The evidence Mr. Pearson provided would have been definitive, but it was excluded on valid legal grounds. That left me with competing testimony, paid experts on one side, character witnesses on the other, and the very real question of whether the system's bias against disabled mothers was clouding my judgment. But Mr. Hayes' confession, even under duress, reveals his state of mind, his intent, and combined with everything else, it paints a clear picture. She stood. Court reconvenes at 9 a.m. I'll issue my ruling then. Mrs. Hayes, get some rest. You are going to need it. I didn't sleep, couldn't sleep. Diane came over to Patricia's office where we'd set up camp. She brought coffee and breakfast sandwiches no one ate. Char, she said, I'm so sorry I had to leave. If I'd known. You did what you had to do. Your kids needed you, I understand. Did you win? I don't know. Maybe. The judge wouldn't tell us. We sat in silence watching the sun rise over the city. In 3 hours, my fate would be decided. In 3 hours, I would know if I got to keep my daughter. At 8:30, we returned to the courthouse. The media presence had tripled. Someone had leaked Nathan's confession. The story was everywhere. Tech CEO's meltdown, confesses to conspiracy. Nathan Hayes admits to witness tampering in custody case. Disability discrimination exposed in shocking court confession. Public opinion had swung back in my direction. Hard. But public opinion didn't determine custody. Only Judge Hartford's ruling mattered. At 9 a.m., the courtroom was packed. Nathan was there, discharged from the hospital against medical advice, his face pale. Ashley sat in the gallery as far from Nathan as possible. Michael Pearson was there, sitting on my side of the courtroom. Dr. Sullivan, David Clark, even Emma, Michael's daughter, in her wheelchair, her father's hand on her shoulder. Judge Hartford entered. We all stood. Please be seated. I've reviewed all testimony, evidence, and the events of this morning. I'm prepared to issue my ruling. The courtroom held its breath. Mr. Hayes' emergency custody motion is denied in its entirety. Full physical and legal custody is awarded to Mrs. Charlotte Hayes. I gasped. Diane grabbed my hand. Furthermore, the judge continued, Mr. Hayes will have no contact with the child until he completes court-mandated therapy and anger management. Any visitation will be supervised at Mrs. Hayes' discretion and contingent on Mr. Hayes' good behavior. Nathan started to stand. Your Honor, you can't. Sit down, Mr. Hayes. I'm not finished. Her voice was ice. I've presided over family court for 23 years. I've seen parents fight over children for petty reasons. I've seen custody used as a weapon. But I have never seen a case as calculated and cruel as this one. Mr. Hayes, you didn't want custody of your child. You wanted to punish your wife for having the audacity to be disabled. You orchestrated her humiliation. You paid witnesses to lie. You weaponized the medical system against her. You researched how much pain she could endure. That is not love. That is not parenting. That is abuse. She turned to me. Mrs. Hayes, I apologize. On behalf of a system that should have protected you and instead became a weapon against you. You shouldn't have had to fight this hard to keep your own child. I'm truly sorry. Tears streamed down my face. As for Mr. Hayes, I'm referring this case to the District Attorney for Criminal Investigation, witness tampering, conspiracy to commit fraud, disability-based discrimination. You may face charges, Mr. Hayes, and you should. The gavel fell. This court is adjourned. Mrs. Hayes, go have your baby. The words were barely out of her mouth when I felt it. My water breaking, for real this time, soaking through my clothes. Patricia, I gasped. It's happening. The courthouse erupted in movement. Someone called 911. Dr. Sullivan was immediately at my side. Nathan tried to approach, but court security blocked him. Sir, the judge said no contact. That's my child being born. Sir, step back now. The ambulance arrived in minutes. EMTs loaded me onto a stretcher. Patricia rode with me, holding my hand. Diane followed in her car. In the ambulance, contractions were coming hard and fast, 2 minutes apart. The EMT checked me. Ma'am, we're not going to make it to the hospital. What? Baby's coming now, right now. Panic flooded me. But we're supposed to be at the hospital. There's supposed to be doctors. I'm not ready. You're ready, Patricia said firmly. You've been ready. You can do this. The EMT was setting up equipment. Okay, Mrs. Hayes, on the next contraction, I need you to push. The pain was incredible, all-consuming. But somewhere in the middle of it, I found something. Strength, determination. The same thing that made me crawl across that airport floor. I pushed and pushed and pushed. And then silence. The baby came out. The EMT caught her, started working, but she wasn't crying. Why isn't she crying? My voice was panic. Why isn't my baby crying? Come on, baby, the EMT murmured, rubbing Grace's back. Come on. 5 seconds, 10, 15. Please, I begged, please let her be okay. 20 seconds, then a tiny cry, weak at first, then stronger. She's okay, the EMT said, smiling. She's okay, just took her a minute. Little fighter. They placed Grace on my chest. She was tiny, red, perfect. I looked down at my daughter and felt everything else fall away. The courtroom, Nathan, the fight. None of it mattered anymore. Hi, baby, I whispered. Hi, Grace. Mama's here. Mama's got you. She looked up at me with dark eyes, and I fell completely in love. At the hospital, they took Grace to the NICU. She was premature, needed monitoring for her lungs, but Dr. Sullivan assured me she was healthy, just needed a few days of observation. I sat in my recovery room exhausted and elated and terrified all at once. Patricia came in with updates. Nathan's lawyers are already trying to negotiate. They want to settle everything quietly, avoid criminal charges in exchange for signing away all custody rights. How much? They're offering $2 million. I thought about it for approximately 3 seconds. I don't want his money. I want him gone. Completely gone. Tell them he signs away all parental rights, agrees to never contact me or Grace again, and I won't press charges. That's the deal. Patricia smiled. Done. 3 days later, Nathan signed the papers. He gave up all rights to Grace in exchange for avoiding criminal prosecution. His company's board voted him out. Michael became CEO, and the first thing he did was implement disability inclusion policies throughout Hayes Technologies. Ashley moved to Arizona. No one would hire her in our city. I took Grace home on a sunny April afternoon. Diane helped me navigate those first terrifying days of new motherhood. Dr. Sullivan checked on us regularly. Patricia stopped by with baby gifts and updates on the legal closure. And slowly, carefully, I built a new life. One that wasn't defined by Nathan's control or the system's doubt. One where I was just a mother, raising her daughter, doing her best. The first week home with Grace was the hardest and most beautiful thing I had ever experienced. Diane stayed at my house those first few nights, sleeping on the couch, helping when Grace cried at 2 in the morning, and I couldn't figure out what she needed. "You're doing great," Diane assured me on the third night, when I was crying almost as much as Grace was. "All new moms feel like this, disabled or not. You're not failing, you're learning." The mechanics of caring for an infant from a wheelchair were challenging, but not impossible. I had spent months preparing. The changing table was at the perfect height. The crib had a drop side. I could transfer Grace from my lap to the crib smoothly. Feeding her while sitting was actually easier than standing. But the exhaustion was real. The constant worry was real. The middle of the night panic that I was somehow doing everything wrong was very, very real. Dr. Sullivan came by for a home visit on day 5. She checked Grace's weight, her color, her reflexes. Everything was perfect. "And how are you?" Rebecca asked me. Terrified, exhausted, happy, all of it. "That's called being a new mother. Charlotte, you're doing wonderfully. Grace is healthy, gaining weight, clearly bonded with you. You're succeeding." It doesn't feel like success. It feels like barely keeping my head above water. That's also called being a new mother. The first few weeks are survival mode for everyone. Give yourself grace. That's what you named her for, remember? 2 weeks after Grace came home, Patricia called. "The settlement is finalized. Nathan signed everything. He has 0 parental rights. He can't contact you or Grace without court permission. It's over, Charlotte. You won." It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like surviving. Sometimes those are the same thing. The settlement included a financial component, despite my initial refusal. Patricia had negotiated that Nathan would pay child support into a trust for Grace's future, but he had no say in how it was spent. The medical trust was dissolved, and I regained full control of my own healthcare decisions. I was free, completely free, and it was terrifying. 4 weeks postpartum, I ventured out of the house for the first time, just to the park, the accessible one near my house. Grace was asleep in a carrier attached to my wheelchair, designed specifically for parents like me. Another mother approached, her own baby in a stroller. "Your daughter is beautiful. How old?" 4 weeks. "Oh, you look amazing for 4 weeks." I was a disaster at that point. We talked for a while. Normal conversation. Mom things, sleep schedules and diaper brands, and whether that weird rash was normal or concerning. She never mentioned my wheelchair. It was just part of me, no more significant than my hair color or my choice of shoes. When she left, I sat there in the sunshine with Grace sleeping against me, and I cried. Not from sadness, from relief, from the realization that this was possible, that I could be a mother who happened to use a wheelchair, not a wheelchair user who people questioned as a mother. The distinction mattered. 2 months after Grace was born, Michael called. "Charlotte, I wanted to update you. Hayes Technologies is thriving. Stock is up 18% since I took over. The Disability Inclusion Initiative has actually made us more attractive to investors. Turns out, not being run by an abusive narcissist is good for business." I laughed. Who would have thought? "Emma wants to meet Grace, if that's okay with you. She's been asking." "Of course, come over whenever." They came the next day. Emma in her wheelchair, Michael pushing her up my accessible ramp. Emma held Grace with practiced ease, her face lighting up. "She's so tiny and perfect. Thank you for everything your dad did. Emma, he put his whole career on the line for us." "I know," he told me about what Mr. Hayes said about me, about you." She looked up. "Dad says I should be proud of who I am, that my wheelchair doesn't define my worth, That people who think less of me because of it are the ones with the problem, not me. Your dad is right. Is it hard being a mom in a wheelchair? I considered the question honestly. Sometimes, but you know what's hard? Being a mom, period. Able-bodied mothers struggle too. They're just as exhausted, just as worried, just as convinced they're doing everything wrong. The wheelchair adds some logistics to figure out, but it doesn't change the core thing, which is love and showing up every day, even when you're exhausted. That's what makes you a good parent, not whether you can walk. Emma smiled. I want to be a mom someday. Everyone says I can't, that it's too hard. Everyone's wrong. You can do anything you prepare for, anything you want badly enough. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. 3 months after Grace was born, Diane threw a small celebration at my house. Just close friends. Dr. Sullivan, Patricia, Michael and Emma, David Clark, the journalist who had recorded the airport video and never asked for anything in return. Grace was awake, making baby noises, grabbing at everything in reach. I held her in my lap while people talked and laughed around us. Patricia pulled me aside. There's something you should know. The DA is pursuing charges against Nathan. Witness tampering, conspiracy, fraud. His lawyers are fighting it, but the evidence is solid. There will be a trial. Will I have to testify? Probably. Are you ready for that? I looked down at Grace, her tiny hand wrapped around my finger. Yes, I'm ready. The trial was set for 6 months later. Nathan's lawyers tried every legal maneuver to delay, to dismiss, to discredit. But the evidence was overwhelming. His own confession, recorded by the court reporter, the paid witnesses who eventually admitted they lied, the paper trail of bribes and schemes. I testified on a Tuesday morning in November. Grace was 7 months old, staying with Diane during the proceedings. The courtroom was less crowded than the custody hearing, but the stakes felt just as high. Nathan's lawyer cross-examined me aggressively, tried to paint me as vindictive, as someone who staged the airport incident, as someone manipulating the system for sympathy. I stayed calm, told the truth, let the evidence speak. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, found Nathan guilty on all counts. Witness tampering, conspiracy to commit fraud, disability discrimination. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 months if he completed therapy and anger management. When the verdict was read, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just exhaustion and a desperate need to get home to my daughter. On Grace's first birthday, I threw a party, a real one with balloons and cake and too many presents. Diane's kids ran around my accessible house. Emma played with Grace, making her laugh. Dr. Sullivan brought a stuffed elephant that was nearly as big as Grace herself. Patricia arrived with champagne. To Charlotte, who fought the system and won. To Charlotte, everyone echoed. We toasted, ate cake, watched Grace smash her face into a cupcake with purple frosting. It was messy and chaotic and absolutely perfect. That night, after everyone left and Grace was asleep, I sat in her nursery, the same room I had set up while pregnant, terrified I would never get to use it. I pulled out my phone and recorded one more video, not for Grace this time, for anyone who might need to hear it. My name is Charlotte Hayes. A year ago, my husband left me on an airport floor, 8 months pregnant, in a wheelchair. He took away my mobility device and walked away while I crawled across dirty tile trying to reach him. He did it to humiliate me, to make sure no one would believe me when I fought back, to use my disability as a weapon against me in a custody battle. The system almost let him win. My honesty was used against me. My requests for help were called weakness. My disability was treated as evidence of incapacity. But I had help, friends who showed up, lawyers who fought, strangers who believed me, a journalist who recorded the truth, a business partner who risked everything to provide evidence, a judge who saw through the manipulation. I won, not because I was perfect, but because I refused to stop fighting. If you're in a situation like I was, if someone is using your disability against you, if the system is failing you, you are not alone. You are not weak. You deserve better. And you can win. It won't be easy. It won't be clean. but you can win. My daughter is sleeping in the next room. Healthy, happy, mine. I get to watch her grow up. That's what I fought for. That's what I won. Don't let anyone tell you you're not enough. You are enough, disability and all. I posted the video to social media. By morning, it had 10,000 views. By evening, 100,000. Messages poured in from disabled parents, from people fighting custody battles, from mothers who needed to hear that they weren't alone. Patricia called. Charlotte, you've started something. The Disability Rights Coalition wants you to speak at their conference. There are 3 mothers who saw your video and reached out for legal help. You're making a difference. I just told my story. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything. Grace took her first steps at 13 months. I was on the floor with her, encouraging her to walk between my lap and the coffee table. She took 3 wobbly steps, fell, laughed, tried again. I cheered like she had won Olympic gold. Later, when she was napping, I thought about the irony. My daughter learning to walk while her mother used a wheelchair. Some people would see tragedy in that, a disabled mother who couldn't teach her daughter to walk. But I saw beauty. Grace would grow up knowing that mobility looked different for different people, that her mother's wheelchair was just a tool, like glasses or a car, that disability wasn't tragedy, it was just another way of moving through the world. She would grow up seeing strength in adaptation, courage in asking for help, power in vulnerability. She would grow up knowing her mother fought for her and won. Grace's second birthday was quieter than her first. Just family. Diane and her kids. Patricia stopped by with a gift. Michael and Emma came for cake. I had started working again, doing consulting for nonprofits on accessibility issues. Remote work, flexible hours, something that let me be present for Grace while also using my skills. The work was fulfilling. I helped organizations understand that accessibility wasn't a burden, it was an opportunity. That designing for disability often meant designing better for everyone. One client, a children's museum, hired me to redesign their space. I brought Grace to meetings, carrying her on my lap while I pointed out which exhibits needed modification. The executive director watched me navigate the space, taking notes. You make this look easy, she said. It's not easy, but it's possible. There's a difference. The museum reopened 6 months later with fully accessible exhibits. Grace and I attended the opening. Emma was there too, trying out the new wheelchair-friendly design. This is amazing, Emma said. I wish every place was like this. It can be, it just takes people willing to do the work. Nathan was released from prison after 20 months. He completed his therapy, met all parole requirements, and the court reduced his sentence for good behavior. I found out through Patricia. He's out, but Charlotte, he can't contact you. The restraining order is permanent. If he violates it, he goes back to prison. Good. He's also professionally finished. No one in tech will hire him. He's essentially unemployable at his previous level. I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No vindication. Nathan was a chapter of my life that was closed. He wasn't part of my present, and he certainly wasn't part of my future. 6 months after his release, an envelope arrived, hand-delivered by a process server. Inside was a letter. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity won. Charlotte, I know I'm not supposed to contact you. This letter is being delivered through my lawyer to ensure I'm not violating the order. You don't have to read it, but I needed to write it. I was wrong about everything. What I did was unforgivable. The airport, the custody battle, the cruelty, all of it. There's no excuse. Therapy has helped me see that I was never angry at you for being disabled. I was angry at myself for not being able to cope with your disability, for being weak when you needed me to be strong. And instead of dealing with that, I blamed you, made you the problem instead of facing my own failures. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I understand now what I couldn't see then. You were never the burden. My inability to love you through hardship was the burden. My ego, my selfishness. I'm not asking to be part of Grace's life. You made the right choice in keeping me away from her. I would have been a terrible father. I hope she grows up knowing how hard you fought for her. I hope she understands what strength really means. I'm sorry, I know those words are inadequate, but they're true. Nathan, I read the letter twice. Then I put it in a drawer and went to make Grace lunch. Diane asked later if I would ever forgive him. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe someday. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean trust. He broke something that can't be repaired. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if he had just been honest? If he had said he was struggling, that he needed help adjusting to your disability? All the time. We could have gone to therapy, worked through it together, but he didn't want to work through it. He wanted an easy exit, and when I didn't give him one, he tried to destroy me. You know what amazes me, Dikani, Diane said, how you don't seem bitter. Oh, I am bitter sometimes. When I watch Grace do something new and Nathan isn't here to see it, I'm bitter that he chose to be absent. When I have to explain to her someday why her father isn't in her life, I'll be bitter about that too. But bitterness isn't the same as being broken. I'm not broken. I'm just a single mom doing her best. When Grace was 3, a woman approached me at the park. She was pregnant, using a wheelchair, her face tight with stress. Excuse me, are you Charlotte Hayes? Yes. I saw your video from the airport. I'm 7 months pregnant. My husband is saying I can't parent alone, that I'll lose the baby in a custody fight. And I don't know if he's right. I don't know if I can turn. I looked at her, seeing my past self, scared, doubtful, wondering if disability really did mean incapacity. He's not right. He's scared you'll realize you don't need him. I pulled out my phone, typed in a number. This is my lawyer, Patricia Morrison. Tell her I sent you. She'll help you. I don't have money for a lawyer like that. She'll work it out. Call her today. Promise me. The woman took my number with shaking hands. Thank you. Thank you so much. After she left, Diane smiled. You're doing it, helping others. Because someone helped me, Patricia. Rebecca, Michael, you. I survived because people showed up. Over the next year, I helped 3 more women in similar situations. Not financially, I wasn't wealthy, but I connected them with resources. Testified as an expert witness in one case. Shared my story so they knew they weren't alone. Patricia started a nonprofit, Lawyers Against Disability Discrimination. I served on the board. We helped dozens of disabled parents navigate custody battles, fight discrimination, assert their rights. The work was hard, heartbreaking sometimes when we lost cases, but necessary. Grace started preschool at 4. The first day, I wheeled her to her classroom, helped her hang up her backpack, kissed her goodbye. A father standing nearby watched us. His expression was complicated, not hostile, but confused, like he was trying to reconcile his assumptions with reality. Grace's teacher, Ms. Anderson, greeted us warmly. Grace, we're so glad you're here. Charlotte, if you have any questions or need anything, please reach out. Thank you. Grace has been excited about this for weeks. After I left, I sat in my car and cried. Not sad tears, proud ones. My daughter was starting school, like millions of other kids. Normal, ordinary, perfect. That afternoon, I picked Grace up. She ran to me, threw her arms around my neck. Mama, I made a friend. Her name is Lily, and we played blocks and had snack. And Ms. Anderson says tomorrow we do painting. That sounds wonderful, baby. In the car, Grace asked, Mama, why do you have a wheelchair? It was the first time she had asked directly. She knew I used it, of course. It had been part of her life forever. But now she was old enough to wonder why. I was in a car accident before you were born. It hurt my back and my legs. The wheelchair helps me move around when my legs are too tired. Does it hurt? Sometimes, but mostly it just helps me. Oh, she thought about this. Lily's dad has glasses. They help him see. Your wheelchair helps you move. Exactly. Okay. And that was it. No trauma, no pity, just understanding. I realized that Grace would grow up seeing disability as neutral, not tragic, not inspiring, just part of the diversity of human experience. That was my greatest victory. Raising a daughter who would never doubt that her mother was capable simply because her mother used a wheelchair. On Grace's 5th birthday, Patricia called. Charlotte, there's a case I need to tell you about. A mother in Georgia. Husband took the kids while she was in the hospital having surgery, claimed she was medically unfit, used her disability against her in court. She lost custody. How can I help? Testify, expert witness, share your story. Show the jury that disabled parents are capable. When's the trial? 3 weeks in Atlanta. It's a lot to ask, I know. Taking Grace out of school, traveling. I'll do it. Charlotte, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Because if someone hadn't fought for me, I wouldn't have Grace. If Michael hadn't risked his career, if you hadn't taken my case, if Dr. Sullivan hadn't documented everything, I have to pay that forward. 3 weeks later, I testified in a courthouse in Atlanta, told my story, explained how disability doesn't equal incapacity, how the system's bias puts disabled parents at a disadvantage, but that doesn't mean we can't parent effectively. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, found in favor of the mother. She got her kids back. She found me afterward in the hallway crying. Thank you. Thank you for fighting for me. You fought for yourself. I just told my story. You gave me hope. When I thought I'd lost everything, your story made me believe I could win. That night on the plane home with Grace asleep on my lap, I thought about everything that had happened. The airport, the crawl, the trial, the victory. The years of building a new life. I had thought the airport was my lowest moment, my breaking point, the thing that would define me forever. But I was wrong. It was just the beginning. The moment I discovered what I was capable of. The moment I learned that crawling across a floor didn't make me weak. It made me a fighter. 6 years after the airport incident, I stood in front of 200 people at the Disability Rights Coalition annual conference. Grace, now 7 years old, sat in the front row next to Diane. Patricia was there. Dr. Sullivan, Michael, and Emma, who was now in college studying design. My name is Charlotte Hayes, I began. And 6 years ago, my husband left me on an airport floor. I told the story, all of it. The crawl, the betrayal, the custody battle, the moment I thought I would lose everything, and the fight to win it back. I'm here today to tell you 3 things. First, if someone is using your disability as a weapon against you, you are not imagining it. You are not oversensitive. You are being abused, and you deserve help. Second, the system is biased on you. It will question your capabilities simply because you're disabled. You will have to prove yourself twice as much, work twice as hard, fight twice as long. That's not fair, but it's reality, and knowing that reality helps you prepare for it. Third and most important, you can win. It won't be easy. You'll need help. You'll need allies. You'll need people who believe in you when the system doesn't. But you can win. I looked at Grace. My daughter is 7 years old. She's smart, curious, stubborn, and completely convinced her mother can do anything. Because she's watched me do hard things her whole life. She's seen me adapt, problem solve, ask for help, keep going. She'll grow up knowing that disability doesn't equal weakness, that asking for accommodation isn't asking for special treatment, that her mother's wheelchair is just a tool like any other. That's my legacy. Not that I was a disabled woman who became a mother despite the odds, but that I was a mother who happened to be disabled, and that was never the most important thing about me. Thank you. The applause was thunderous. People stood. Several wiped tears. Grace ran to me, threw her arms around my neck. That was great, Mama. Thank you, baby. After the conference, a group of us went to dinner. Diane, Patricia, Dr. Sullivan, Michael, Emma. Grace sat between Diane's daughter, Sophie, and Emma, chattering about school and friends and the new playground near our house. To Charlotte, Patricia said, raising her glass, who turned her worst moment into her greatest strength. To Charlotte, everyone echoed. And to Grace, I added, who made all of it worth fighting for. We toasted, ate, talked, laughed. It was ordinary and extraordinary all at once. Later, walking to the car with Grace's hand in mine, she asked, Mom, are you famous? A little bit, in some communities. Because you crawled at the airport? Because I fought for you, and because I help other moms fight now, too. That's good. Everyone should have a mom who fights for them. Yes, they should. That night, after Grace was asleep, I sat on my accessible porch and looked at the stars. My phone buzzed, an email from a woman I didn't know. Dear Charlotte, I attended your talk today. I'm 8 months pregnant. My husband says I can't take care of a baby because I'm in a wheelchair. He's threatening a custody battle. I'm terrified. But then I heard you speak, and I saw your daughter. She was looking at you like you were a superhero, and I thought, if Charlotte can do this, maybe I can too. Can you help me? I replied immediately. Yes, I can help you. You're not alone. Here's my lawyer's number. Here's the name of a support group. Here's my phone number if you need to talk. You can do this. You're stronger than you know. I sent the email and felt something settle in my chest. Purpose, meaning the knowledge that my suffering hadn't been pointless. It had equipped me to help others avoid the same pain. The airport hadn't destroyed me. It had forged me into something stronger than I knew I could be. The next morning, I woke to Grace jumping on my bed. Mama, wake up! It's pancake day! It's Tuesday. Since when is Tuesday pancake day? Since now, I decided. Come on! I transferred from my bed to my wheelchair, scooped Grace onto my lap, and wheeled us to the kitchen. She helped me make chocolate chip pancakes, standing on a step stool so she could reach the counter, narrating every step like it was the most important cooking show in the world. We ate breakfast. She told me about her friend Lily's upcoming birthday party. I reminded her she had homework. She negotiated for 5 more minutes of playtime. It was completely, wonderfully ordinary. This was what I fought for, not headlines or lawsuits or vindication, not even justice, though that mattered. I fought for Pancake Tuesdays, for school drop-offs and bedtime stories and scraped knees, for the privilege of being exhausted by a 7-year-old's endless energy, for the ordinary, sacred work of motherhood. And I won. 10 years after the airport incident, Grace was 12. We were at the same park where I first met the pregnant woman who needed help. The accessible playground I had helped design was full of kids, some in wheelchairs, some with other disabilities, some able-bodied, all of them playing together. A teenage girl approached. She was maybe 17, using a forearm crutch, and she looked nervous. Excuse me, are you Charlotte Hayes? Yes. I'm doing a project for school about disability rights activists. Can I interview you? Of course. She asked about the airport, about the custody battle, about the work I do now, standard questions. But then she asked something different. Do you ever regret it, fighting so hard? It would have been easier to just give up. I thought about the question seriously. Easier? Yes. Better? No. If I had given up, I wouldn't have Grace. And she's the best thing in my life. So no, I don't regret fighting. I regret that I had to fight at all. I regret that the system is set up to question disabled parents by default. But the fight itself, I'd do it again tomorrow. My mom uses a wheelchair, the girl said quietly. People stare at us sometimes, like they feel sorry for me, like having a disabled parent is tragic. And is it tragic? No, she's just my mom. She picks me up from school and helps with my homework and yells at me for leaving dishes in my room. The wheelchair is just how she moves around. Then those people who pity you are wrong. You get that, right? Yeah, I do. She smiled. Thank you for your story. It helps knowing that someone fought and won. After she left, Grace came over, sweaty from playing. Who was that? A student doing a project. About you? About disability rights. I'm just one example. You're a good example, though. You're really strong, Mama. You know what, Gracie? I didn't used to think I was strong. I thought strong people didn't need help, didn't struggle, didn't crawl across airport floors. But you did all that, and you still won. That's stronger. Out of the mouths of children. That night, I recorded one final video, not for public posting, just for Grace, for when she was older. Hi, Grace, it's your mama. You're 12 years old now, asleep in your room, probably reading under the covers with a flashlight, even though I said lights out an hour ago. I wanted to record this for you to watch when you're older, when you're trying to figure out who you are and what you're capable of. I want you to know that the airport incident, the crawl, the fight for custody, all of it, that wasn't the defining moment of my life. You are. Baar. Being your mother is the defining moment of my life. Everything else, the disability, the abuse, the legal battles, the activism work, All of that is context, important context. But you're the story. You've grown up watching me navigate the world from a wheelchair. I hope that's taught you that there are many ways to be strong, many ways to be capable, many ways to be whole. I hope you never doubt your own worth because someone else doubts it. I hope you fight for yourself the way I fought for you. I hope you ask for help when you need it and offer help when others need it. And most of all, I hope you know you were wanted, you were fought for, you are loved beyond measure. Being your mother is my greatest honor, not my greatest challenge, not something I overcame despite my disability. My greatest honor, period. I love you, Grace Charlotte Thursday, ons, forever and always, your mama. I saved the video, closed my laptop, wheeled quietly to Grace's room and opened the door just a crack. She was indeed reading by flashlight, a book about dragons hidden under her covers. I knocked softly. She jumped, dropped the book, looked guilty. I wasn't reading. Of course not. That would be against the rules. I tried to keep my face serious. Failed, she laughed. Okay, I was reading, but Mama, it's a really good part. The dragon is about to... 10 more minutes, then lights out for real, Danda. 20 minutes? 15. Final offer. Deal. I wheeled away smiling. Fierce negotiator, that kid. Stubborn, strong, exactly like her mother. The years continued. Grace graduated middle school, started high school, learned to drive, applied to colleges. Life happened the way life happens, in moments big and small, ordinary and extraordinary. The airport incident became a story we told, not to define us, but to explain us. This is what we survived. This is what made us stronger. This is where our advocacy work began. But it wasn't the only story. It wasn't even the most important story. The most important story was the one happening every day. Breakfast conversations, homework help, mother-daughter disagreements about curfews and friends and clothes. The 1,000 tiny moments that make up a life. That's what I fought for on that airport floor. Not headlines, not justice, not even vindication. Though that came too. I fought for the ordinary privilege of being a mother. And I won. 20 years after the airport incident, I received an invitation. A women's leadership conference wanted me to give the keynote address. The theme was turning adversity into advocacy. I almost declined. I had told my story hundreds of times by then. It felt old, worn, like a song played too many times. But then the organizer called. Charlotte, we have 300 women registered. 20% of them are disabled. They need to hear from you, not because you're famous, but because you survived and you keep showing up. So I went. Grace came with me. She was 27 now, finishing her master's degree in social work, engaged to a kind man named Daniel, who looked at her the way I wished Nathan had looked at me, with respect and love and partnership. I stood on that stage and looked out at 300 faces. My name is Charlotte Hayes. 20 years ago, my husband left me on an airport floor, and I want to tell you what happened next. I told the story, the crawl, the betrayal, the fight, the victory, all of it. But then I said something I had never said before in any speech. The airport was the worst day of my life, but it wasn't the last day. And that's what I want you to understand. Adversity doesn't end your story. It doesn't define your story. It's just a chapter, a hard chapter. A chapter you'll remember forever, but still just a chapter. What matters is what you do next, how you heal, who you help, what you build from the wreckage. I built a life, a good life, a full life. I raised my daughter. I helped other women fight for their children. I changed policies and laws and systems, one small step at a time. But more than that, I learned to make pancakes on Tuesday mornings and braid my daughter's hair and negotiate curfews and celebrate report cards and survive teenage drama and teach someone to drive and plan weddings. That's the real story. Not that I crawled across an airport floor, but that I got up from that floor and kept living. So whatever hard chapter you're in right now, this is not the end. Get up, keep living. Your story is not over. The applause was deafening. Women stood, some cried. Many approached me afterward with their own stories. One woman said, "You saved my life, not in that moment, but over time." Knowing that someone fought and survived and built something beautiful, it kept me going. Then do the same for someone else, I said. Pass it forward. Help the next person who needs it. Grace got married in the spring. Daniel's vows included, I promise to love you the way your mother taught you to love, fiercely, honestly, with everything I have. Grace looked at me during that moment, tears streaming down her face. I cried too. At the reception, Grace gave a speech thanking everyone. At the end, she said, my mother once told me she fought for the privilege of making me pancakes on Tuesday mornings, for ordinary moments, for the sacred work of motherhood. I grew up watching her fight, not just for me, but for herself, for other mothers, for a world where disability isn't a barrier to love, to family, to being seen as whole. She taught me that strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting up every single time. Mama, thank you for everything. For fighting for me before I was born. For showing me what real courage looks like. For teaching me to stand up for myself, even though you can't stand yourself. You're my hero, not despite your disability. Just you, all of you. I wheeled to the front, hugged my daughter, whispered in her ear, I love you, Gracie. Thank you for being worth every single fight. I love you too, Mama. Now, at 54 years old, I sit on my porch and think about the journey, the airport floor, the crawl, the fight, the victory, the years of advocacy work, the women I helped, the laws that changed, the systems that improved. But mostly I think about Grace. She's 29 now, pregnant with her first child, excited and terrified the way all first-time mothers are. What if I'm not good at it, she asked me last week. Then you'll learn. That's what parenting is, figuring it out as you go. Were you scared when you were pregnant with me? Terrified, not just of being a new mom, but of whether I'd even get to be your mom at all. I'm so glad you fought for me. Me too, baby. Me too. They say you never really know someone until they have nothing left to gain from you. I learned that on an airport floor, but I also learned something else, something more important. You never really know yourself until you have everything to lose and you fight anyway. I learned that on that same floor. Hands on sticky tile, pregnant belly dragging, husband walking away, everything falling apart. And I learned that strength isn't found in perfect moments or easy victories. It's found in the decision to keep going when every option seems impossible. That's my story. Not that I was disabled and became a mother, but that I was a mother who was disabled, and that was never the most important thing about me. The most important thing about me is that I fought, and I won, and I helped others win too. And Grace, my beautiful daughter, grew up knowing that her mother was strong enough to crawl across an airport floor and wise enough to get up afterward and build a life worth living. That's what I want people to understand. Not that adversity made me stronger, though it did, but that I was already strong. I just didn't know it yet. The airport didn't give me strength. It revealed the strength I always had. And that strength, it's in all of us, waiting for the moment we need it most. My moment came on an airport floor at 6:47 in the morning. When will yours come? And when it does, will you get up? I hope you will. I hope you fight. I hope you win, because you deserve to. And your story isn't over yet.